Well, I don't think about you.
How's it going, Tony?
It's good. We've got some very positive signs. Albo's finally caved into our constant presence outside his office, and the incessant honking horns, I think, are driving his dedicated staff around the twist. So it's working. What we're doing is working. So it's very comforting to see.
Do you know anything about this owner of crypto or cryptomy?
Oh yeah, no. Well, because he published that information before Julian did, he wants to be indicted under the same offence that Julian's indicted under. In other words, he's showing solidarity with a journalist, and he wants to fight that fight for First Amendment rights and in turn for our democracy. He realises, like nobody else, that if Julian goes down, we all follow him. You know, we all follow him in a totalitarian society. It's the end of a democracy and freedom of speech as we know it. And all the great mastheads have also woken up to that, and they've all come out in support. After pillaring him now for over 10 years, all those big mastheads, from the New York Times right through to El País, and all of them, they've all turned the corner, and they're all on the bandwagon. I don't know what turned them around, but there's some very positive news coming out of the world press when it comes to Julian Assange. I'm very optimistic. I think he'll be home by Christmas. I think they're finally realising that he's doing more. I think the deep state are finally seeing him as a liability. You know, they set out to deter journalism, but they realise they're actually firing up rebellion, and they need to let him go so that the embers of rebellion die out. That's the way I see it. He's now a liability to their cause.
Congratulations on the speech day for all the Trinity Grammar kids that are here. I'm sure all your parents are really proud of you. Julian Assange has got parents too up in Queensland. They're really proud of him for releasing details via WikiLeaks of war crimes that Australian politicians and American and English politicians were involved in the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. They're really so proud of Julian, they want him home in Australia, in Queensland. Only yesterday, our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said in Parliament, "It's gone on for long enough. The so-called English system of justice has not served justice in the Julian Assange case. They've locked him up for over 3 years in a maximum security jail. They're refusing to let him come home. How would you like to spend Christmas without your family, without your mum and dads, boys? Think about it. How would you like to be sitting in a maximum security jail for telling the truth? Well, that's what's happened to poor old Julian Assange. He went to a private school, a good school like Trinity as well. He was top of his class. He was so good at computers. He was the whiz kid of the world. And he put that to good use. Good use in exposing international war crimes. So why should he be lingering in jail? I'm sure all you kids of Trinity Grammar have got a conscience. You all stand for human rights and human decency. That's what your education system should be teaching you, and I'm sure it is. So please add your voice. Add your voice to the increasing clamour of over 1 million signatures on the Free Assange online petition. Add your voice to the 5 international newspapers that originally published the WikiLeaks leaks about war crimes in Afghanistan and war crimes in Iraq committed by our allies, the US of A, the Australian Army. As you know, there's been big inquiries into what our boys did in Afghanistan. You're probably not aware that over 35,000 civilians were killed by drones in the 20 years our boys were involved in the war in Afghanistan. WikiLeaks exposed a lot of this. Julian Assange, the whistleblower, is serving a prison sentence and he has not been charged with any substantial crime. He should be free. Anthony Albanese has called on the Americans to release Julian Assange and drop the charges where they're trying to get him deported from England to America to face 175 years jail in a cell somewhat like Guantanamo Bay, where you have no human rights at all. It's coming close to Christmas. As you prepare for your family Christmas dinners, remember Julian Assange's parents, his mother and his father and his brother, who've been campaigning for the last 11 years to bring him, his wife and his 2 kids home to Australia, to Queensland, where he's from. Act now. Demand that Julian Assange be released. It's time for Julian to come home. Free Julian Assange, a whistleblower who exposed war crimes. If anyone should be in jail, it should be the perpetrators of those war crimes. The pilots who deliberately murdered journalists and civilians from the Turkey shoot that Julian Assange released on the Iraqi war tape. The 5 newspapers that use the WikiLeaks information, they have all come out and demanded that Julian Assange be released last Tuesday. Anthony Albanese got up in Parliament this Thursday, just past yesterday, in answer to a Dorothy Dix question from a Labor Party backbencher. He said, whatever Julian Assange may have done that I don't agree with, it's gone on for long enough. Albanese said he had urged the American government at the APEC talks in Thailand, at the G7 and G20 talks, he urged the Biden administration people there to drop the charges, drop the false claims of treason in America. If anyone should be on charge for treason, it should be Colonel General Powell at the UN Security Council and others who claimed there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when there wasn't. That led to an American war, not endorsed by the UN or anyone else, which Australia
Have you signed the petition yet?
went along behind, as we usually do, like a snivelling dog following our master. WikiLeaks, that's the issue, mate. Free Assange. Let him out of prison. Australia went into Iraq under a false preposition that there were weapons of mass destruction. Iraq has been a basket case ever since. The Americans are still there protecting their oil interests because they're exporting 80% of Iraq's oil to America. The Americans have pulled back from Afghanistan, but they're still there supporting ISIS, try to disrupt any attempt to rebuild Afghanistan, and nobody supports the Taliban, but that's not the issue. The issue is every country and people should decide their own future. So what I'm saying is the runs are on the board, the cricketers are batting. Free Julian Assange, drop the charges, contact Albo and Penny Wong in Parliament House and tell them to demand the English justice system, prove it has some justice and let him go now. Thank you very much. Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange. Thank you very much. Every Friday for 3 years we've been here hollering to the politicians to do their job and stand up for the rights of an Australian citizen who's been very, very wrongfully treated. It's irrefutable that Assange has been wrongfully treated, merely for reporting on crimes of public officials.
But we've been here for 3 years.
I'm making paper.
It's actually last Tuesday, the 29th, was our third anniversary. Our 158th town hall gathering. So welcome. Thank you all for listening to us. Not that you have any choice. If you're here, you've got to listen to us because we've got this loud speaker. So I'd like to welcome you all to the 158th week of Julian Assange Town Hall gatherings and our third anniversary. Julian Assange has been illegally detained for 12 years. After exposure to the past 12 years, everyone should clearly know that Julian Assange is completely innocent, and that all the smearing and character assassination he has received in the media has been fabricated in order to take our eyes off the crimes of the real criminals who are orchestrating a completely corrupted political system. This week we have seen a collective push in the mainstream to have US authorities drop the extradition of Julian Assange. 5 of the world's leading masthead newspapers and the Brazilian parliament have urged the US to drop its extradition of Julian Assange, while the words "enough is enough" have yet again been uttered by the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The truthful words they should be saying is that Julian Assange is completely innocent and that he should never have been detained. It's not just that Julian has been illegally denied his freedom for 12 years, he has also been illegally tortured, most probably resulting in him having a mini-stroke last October during one of his many court hearings that he, by the way, was not allowed to attend. We need Anthony Albanese to loudly and honestly stand up for Julian Assange, and we'd rather not hear his opinions about Julian. I noted that in Parliament he had to throw in his opinion of Julian. I'd like to tell Anthony Albanese we don't give a flying F what he thinks about Julian Assange. It is irrelevant. Irrelevant. What is the facts and the truth here is that he is an innocent Australian, award-winning journalist that is doing some of the best journalistic work ever, and he's been locked up for 12 years. And that is a crime against us all. Ignorance is a choice. Remaining ignorant of available facts avoids the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. Ignorance is the easiest option in the short term, yet it is never the best option in the long term. Ignorance of the law is not a legal defence. Ignorance of available facts is not a good excuse for justifying inaction when it comes to dealing with a corrupted system. We must all take responsibility for informing ourselves with the evidence that is available. Acting democratically is what we must do. We must stand together and fight corruption. And we are doing that when we fight to free Julian Assange. Julian did the right thing by publishing evidence. He should never have been detained. A free press is essential for democracy. But with the detainment of Julian Assange, it is clear we don't have a free press. Our free speech is essential for our democracy, but it is becoming harder to speak freely without the intervention of governments and corporations. In New South Wales, the state government is pushing ahead with digital IDs by implementing an official pilot digital ID program, which it is making possible through the Service New South Wales app. This dystopian New South Wales digital ID is being marketed as simple, safe, secure and highly convenient. Such a system will make it very difficult, if not impossible, for people to resist being controlled by corrupt governments and corporations. Truthful information that fails to conform with the mainstream false narrative can be labelled as dangerous misinformation. Digital IDs will make it easy for a corrupt system to disadvantage individuals who speak up against false narratives. Often people are manipulated through fear-mongering to adopt new technologies that undermine well-being. The benefit that free speech affords our society is being cast aside to usher in systems of control that will be almost impossible for honest, decent people to resist. After 12 years of Julian Assange being detained for informing the world about corruption and crimes against humanity, we all have had enough time to realise what we all must do. We must free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Thank you.
The United Nations since 1945 has had an International Human Rights Day on December the 10th. And this year there will be a quiet reflection outside our Prime Minister's office, Anthony Albanese, at 344A Marrickville Road at 11 a.m. to reflect quietly, meditate, prayer or send positive affirmations for Julian Assange's release, good health and strength. It's on December the 10th, 11 a.m, 334A Marrickville Road. May you all have a happy and Merry Christmas with your families, and free Julian Assange so he can come home to his family in Queensland.
In 2010, Julian Assange worked with a number of newspapers, including the New York Times, Der Spiegel and The Guardian. And they published some of the 251,000 classified US documents provided by WikiLeaks. These included US war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. This week, these media outlets and others urged the US to drop the charges against Assange. While it's taken over a decade for them to do so, it's certainly welcome. And it's a good change from the smears and outright lies that we've heard from some of these outlets. I'm very thankful that they've had this epiphany. After all, Obama said he could not charge Assange without charging the New York Times likewise. The outlets noted that the indictment against Assange sets a dangerous precedent and threatens to undermine America's First Amendment and freedom of the press. Obtaining and disclosing sensitive information, when necessary, is in the public interest and is a core part of the daily work of journalists. If that work is criminalised, our public discourse and our democracies are made significantly weaker. 12 years after the publication of Cablegate, it is time for the US government to end its prosecution of Julian Assange. The independent MP for Kooyong, Dr. Monique Ryan, asked Mr. Albanese whether the government could intervene to bring Mr. Assange home. She said that public interest journalism is essential in a democracy. Mr. Albanese said he has raised the case against Julian Assange with US officials and urged that the charges of espionage and conspiracy be dropped. This is a litmus test to see how the alliance between Australia and the United States is viewed by the United States. We are told we have a strong bond with the US, and if that is the case, we can expect Julian to be united with his loved ones shortly. If the US do not drop the charges against Julian in the immediate future, it shows me that the US holds no respect for Australia or its people, and the alliance is a one-way street where we are subservient to our masters in the US government. Julian should never have been charged. He should never have been locked up in a high-security prison in London. When he was first sent to Belmarsh prison, he was told he was HIV positive. A lie. His warm clothing was withheld. He was unable to speak with his lawyers and asked for a computer. When he was finally given a computer, the keys were glued down. We found out that the US government agencies spied on him and his doctors and lawyers, and there was a plan to kidnap and kill him. These atrocities should never have occurred. These actions show a vile vengeance. Free inmate, our mate Julian Assange.
Thank you, Karen. Karen organises she's part of a group that meet regularly outside Albanese's office. On a Thursday morning at 11 o'clock, they've developed a tradition where Albanese is a traditional politician and a local Marrickville boy, and most people in Marrickville have met Albo on the streets. He's very much a man of the people. So I think it's with great embarrassment that this tradition has developed outside his electoral office in Marrickville Road. When people drive past, they toot their horns. Recently, a prime mover dragging a trailer went past Albo's office and gave a large blast on their air horns. No doubt this very vocal, loud protest that would actually be heard by his staff members inside the office has had a bearing on Albo's change of heart the other day before Parliament. So I'd like to acknowledge Karen and the group that meet every Thursday at 11 o'clock outside Albo's office. And while I'm here talking about groups meeting outside Albo's office. Saturday, December the 10th, is International Human Rights Day. And on that day, also at 11 a.m. in the morning, there will be a quiet gathering to reflect on the injustice that's being perpetrated against our very own award-winning journalist Julian Assange. No doubt some of the passing vehicles won't observe that silent reflection and they'll sound their horns. And I would encourage them to do so, because obviously Albo's quiet diplomacy is not working. I haven't counted the months since he's been our Prime Minister, but this is the first little murmur we've heard out of him. And along with that murmur, six months, is it? Just been informed it's 6 months now. Albo's been our Prime Minister. And after 6 months of refusing to talk to John Shipton, Julian's father, and Gabriel Shipton, Julian's brother, and banning the book by Professor Niels Meltzer about the whole sordid saga, Albo has banned that book, although I believe the ban has recently been lifted on that book before Parliament. But there was a ban on that book in Parliament. I think the excuse was that it's protest material. It's not protest material, it's factual data outlining criminal behaviour by the former UN rapporteur on torture who visited Julian in jail, Professor Niels Meltzer. So folks, I urge you, if you're doing nothing on Saturday the 10th at 11 o'clock, go down to Albo's office in Marrickville and quietly reflect with the others on this brutal persecution that goes on and on and on. And also, while I'm talking about our Prime Minister, I would like to make the point that we don't want to hear his opinion of Julian Assange. He freely gave that opinion on 2 occasions. I won't repeat it because it's just garbage and it's part of the narrative and it's unnecessary and it distorts the truth of the situation. And in fact, the whole saying, enough is enough, is a perversion of the reality. It's always been too much. An innocent man being held for 1 minute is too much, let alone 12 years. And now 3.5 years in solitary confinement in one of the world's strongest prisons with some of the most criminal of criminals. Thank you all for listening.
Stand up, Australia.
There's 3 of them. Petitions online.
Make a wish.
Julian be free by Christmas.
Thank you. And then we never go down on the first thing, so that's a lot.
That's not the country that we are living in. This man, who should be in Oslo getting the Nobel Peace Prize, was being stripped and searched by goons in absolute brazen defiance of the rule of soul, and that's the reality of the so-called.
Julian should be free. Julian should be free.
See his muddy face. Stand up for our Australian journalist, Julian Assange. Right. Good clean.
Free Julian Assange.
Decision!
No extradition!
There is only one decision! No extradition! Inmate! Inmate! Julian Assange! Inmate! Inmate! Julian Assange!
Free! 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 Free!
Julian Assange! Inmate!
Julian Assange! Only one decision.
No extradition!
There's only one decision.
No extradition!
There is absolutely only one decision.
No extradition!
Thank you.
What? PSYOP? Well, I think the government, they're using him to as a psychological operation, in that they're torturing him so that no one else will speak up like he did. No one's been able to show that anything that WikiLeaks has published is non-genuine. Yeah.
Last week, a well-known Sydney protester, Danny Lim, who's known for his message of peace and love, and his emblem is a smiley face on a paddle pop stick. Danny Lim was brutally assaulted by New South Wales police in the Queen Victoria building, that resulted in him being picked up with his hands held behind his back, one of them in a handcuff, and he was pile-driven into the concrete tiled floor of the Queen Victoria building by the two burly police officers, resulting in a suspected fracture to the skull, a brain hemorrhage, suspected neck injuries, a laceration to the cheek requiring a number of stitches. Danny is still suffering psychologically from that attack, which is not the first attack by the New South Wales police, or in fact citizens of New South Wales, upon Danny Lim. It's an attempt, I believe, to silence a minority. There's a racist element to it that is undeniable. I feel that because, as a white serial protester who has said no to the New South Wales police on many occasions, who has refused the directives and the lies and the false information that they've given me, they've issued me with in 3 years, they've issued me with one court attendance notice, which they promptly removed because they know they couldn't win that case. They have not laid a finger on me, even though my behaviour has been less than courteous at times to the New South Wales Police. But because of the colour of my skin, I have been allowed to continue my protest. Whereas in a similar period, Danny Lim's been attacked I think it's 5 times, physically attacked I'm talking about, and his dog, now deceased, has been physically attacked by the New South Wales Police. This matter is currently being reviewed by the New South Wales Police and will ultimately come before the courts, where Danny will take out a civil action against the New South Wales Police. He's got some pretty solid evidence. Fortunately, somebody captured his brutal assault on video. That video's gone viral. It's gone all around the world. We've now got a reputation in New South Wales for a brutal police force. A police force that I now regret having actively supported, because I felt they were supporting Julian Assange. But I now realise it's got nothing to do with Julian Assange. It's got everything to do with who I am. And they capitulate with what I've got to say to them, because I know what the law is, and that they know I know what the law is, and they know that I know they're lying. And then intimidatory tactics don't work on me. Whereas when they attack people from a different culture, maybe with a different understanding of authority and the capabilities of what that authority is capable of, are somewhat differently disposed to authority. And Danny Lim is a shining example of this. And we will be supporting him all the way through his court case. He's been doing this work now for 35 years in Australia. He's universally loved. He's seen as an iconic piece of street performance for Sydney. His smiley face, his cheeky jokes are now a part of our great city. He's got 600, I found out, I was talking to him the other day, he's got 600 different sandwich board vests that he's assembled over the last 35 years of protesting. This man loves this country as his own. He's given up his Malaysian citizenship to become an Australian citizen. He calls himself an Aussie. He's got the spirit of an Aussie, and as far as I'm concerned, he's as Australian as they come, because he speaks up for the underdog. He stands up for the downtrodden. That's what we Aussies do. And anybody that's not doing that, anybody that's trying to stamp on Julian's name, is not an Aussie as far as I'm concerned, because we stick up for each other. We've got each other's back. That's the essence of the Australian people. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. You're an Aussie if you live by those standards. And also the other thing about Danny is his cheeky humour. His irreverent cheeky humour is the larrikin spirit that made Australia the free-spirited, free-speaking people that we are, that is currently being attempted, our politicians are attempting to crush this out of us with legislation, to outlaw speaking out against authority, for speaking out against the narrative. We're going to be framed as terrorists and treated. I just had someone say respect for authority and play by the rules. I'd just like to say I would like to issue a notice to the authorities. Play by the rules. Our authorities are not playing by the rules, and we will stand here and point that out. And anybody that would like to challenge that point of view is free to come here and speak in this microphone. I'd love to hear your arguments, because I'm so now caught up in the opposite argument that a bit of open debate, and I assure you I'll be respectful and I'll listen to your arguments, and we can have a proper intercourse of ideas, which is what free speech is all about. We don't want to suppress those who believe Julian is a threat to our national security. We want to hear from you. If you truly believe that, come and make your case. I promise you, you will be respected. You will be heard. And the worst that will happen to you, you will have people argue against you. But it will be a respectful discussion. We're going to have to pack up soon, so you better make it quick if you want to come and say something. Well, if nobody's coming forward, we'll say goodbye.
Don't forget, come join us next Friday at 5 o'clock. We're here every Friday until the government acts to get Julian Assange released from prison.
Oh, thank you, Maddie, for that chocolate cake. That was the best. So good. Triple layered chocolate. Awesome. Can we get a photo of it? Come on, bring the camera in here and see the 3 layers. Look at that. Beautiful. Doesn't that make your mouth water? 3 years, last Tuesday, the 29th of November, was our birthday. So it's a bit of a late birthday cake.
Free Julian! Say it again. Free Julian! Excellent, thank you. Have a good one, enjoy the rest of tomorrow. Yeah, and
We are all Assange.